In 1993, researchers developed a new tool called CRISPR that made it possible to use genetic editing to treat fatal illnesses. Nevertheless, the US government outlawed CRISPR in 2016 due to the possibility of misuse, branding it a weapon of mass destruction. Carrie, who is requesting assistance from the control room, is the last survivor of the crew of the space station Athena-1, which is currently in utter disrepair. Carrie must first collect the mutagen samples since her supervisor would not release the hatch to the escape capsule without her doing so. Carrie searches through the wreck in her fear and need to survive and collects the 3 samples, but sadly the adversary has noticed her. It turns out that a botched experiment produced a monsterized mutant rat that went insane and is now pursuing Carrie. The astronaut runs off as quickly as she can, escaping the debris and the fire, and she enters the escape capsule just in time for the rat to grab her. Unfortunately, the rat's rampage also damaged the capsule, so it explodes and kills Carrie as the pieces fall to Earth as Carrie leaves and witnesses the station explode. Later, at the San Diego Wildlife Sanctuary, primatologist Davis shows the gorilla enclosure to his buddy Nelson, 2 new staffers, and himself. Davis utilizes sign language to settle down the most aggressive newcomer Pavo since he is upsetting the females. At that point, Davis's closest buddy George arrives, and Pavo becomes hostile once more due to the presence of a second male gorilla. When one of the workers becomes frightened and tries to flee, Pavo chases after him and pushes him to the ground. However, George intervenes and frightens Pavo away before anything significant occurs. After it's over, George and Davis joke around a lot while communicating through sign language, and Davis reminds George that Pavo is now part of the family and needs to be protected as well. George offers Davis the middle finger first as he asks for a fist bump. Following that, a coworker approaches Davis about going out, but he declines, and Nelson makes fun of him for preferring animals to people. The 3 mutagen canisters that Carrie grabbed eventually make their way to Earth later that night. One flies inside the sanctuary and shoots its contents at George. While the third one falls into the river and is ingested by a crocodile, the second one lands in the forest and is discovered by a wolf. The following day, when Davis visits the sanctuary, Nelson informs him of some bad news. George is acting in an abnormally violent manner and has broken into the grizzly enclosure, where he murdered a bear. When Davis goes to check on George, he finds that the gorilla has also been hurt by the bear. The biggest surprise is that George has gotten considerably bigger. He is depressed and apologizes for his error. When Davis's team searches the area and discovers the canister, Davis chooses to keep it for future study. Later, he examines George's blood work and concludes that it is inexplicable since growth hormone, which should have quickly killed George, is present in fatal concentrations. Nelson believes George should be killed, but Davis refuses to do so until they get more information. Brett and Claire, who are siblings, are arguing in the meanwhile. Brett is upset about all the money they lost when the station detonated because his business Energine is the one behind the study of the mutagen. Claire is content with the outcomes though, since the mutant rat's confirmation that the Project Rampage experiment was successful makes her pleased. A report from the Meteor Society reveals the location of one of the containers that was constructed to endure re-entry, giving her hope for advancement. She thus engages Burke and his private military team to retrieve it. Burke's crew visits the forest and finds that the canister has been destroyed and empty in addition to the deaths of all the wolves, which they inform Claire of. As a result, she realizes the wolf is evolving, and she gives Burke the order to trap it. Kate, who lives in the city, watches the news and finds out about both the tragedy on Athena-1 and George's bear assault. She realizes the connection because she was formerly an Energine scientist, hurries to the sanctuary, and informs Davis that the canister he discovered contains a sample she created. Davis is skeptical of her, but Kate starts listing all the symptoms George is experiencing to show Davis that she is the genuine deal, and the only person who can treat George. It turns out that the mutagen is altering George's DNA by fusing it with animal DNA, which is why he is growing quickly and becoming more violent. George suddenly loses his cool and begins to attack the cage, eventually breaking it and escaping. Then he starts rampaging into the church, causing mayhem among the visitors and even smashing automobiles with his fists. As soon as the cops show there, they prepare to shoot him, but Davis intervenes and uses sign language to pacify George. The police laid their weapons down, but a helicopter sniper didn't receive the message and shot George with tranquilizer darts. Burke and his group, meanwhile, stumble upon Ralph, the mutant wolf, in the wilderness. From the helicopter, they are able to shoot him down, after which they land and search for his corpse. A few troops are alarmed when they discover a large paw print on the ground in place of the body, which has vanished. Ralph suddenly attacks a few seconds later and starts murdering each soldier one by one. They attempt to protect themselves with their guns, and the helicopter also fires a machine gun, but Ralph has an extremely thick skin from the earlier shot, so the bullets just irritate him. He has also gotten so enormous that he can assault the aircraft and destroy it by leaping incredible distances in the air. Burke, the lone survivor, tries to battle the wolf once again on the ground, but Ralph simply eats him. As George is being taken away in a government plane with Davis and Kate, Agent Russell of the FBI arrests them for performing illegitimate experiments on him. Davis observes George's wounds are already mending when he is in the cage. The two are then subjected to an interrogation by Russell, who insults them and ignores their warnings about the dangers of keeping George in an aircraft while making fun of Davis for leaving the army to care for animals. He also discloses that Kate tried to steal research from Energyne 2 years prior, for which she was imprisoned for 13 months. As a result, she was sacked from the firm. Davis loses faith in Kate as a result of her admission that she cannot genuinely heal George. Back in Energyne, Claire hears that Kate was detained, and Brett views Kate as a danger since he believes she is gathering information to bring down the corporation. Claire devises a plan after learning that she does possess a treatment for the mutagen. She would use low-frequency radio waves to call all the mutant animals to her building, where the military will murder them while Claire collects their DNA for later sale. She doesn't care about Kate since she is certain that George would eventually kill everyone on the plane. Ralph quickly stops destroying the vehicles and the roads as Claire switches on the gadget and begins moving toward the city. The mutant crocodile Lizzie detects it as well and takes off as well. George is meant to be drugged for the flight, but Claire's deception wakes him awake in a rage. He wrecks the cage and begins tormenting everything around him, throwing people around like they were of no consequence. When Russell tries to pursue him, George quickly knocks him down with his foot as the guards begin firing at him ineffectively. Davis tries to converse with him, but just then another soldier begins shooting, further enraging George. The plane begins to descend after a bullet strikes a crate of explosives, which explodes and destroys the turbine. Davis hurries to put parachutes on himself, Kate, and Russell just as George is being forced up against the wall by a cart. They are able to get off the plane before it crashes while George is still inside it. However, they are unable to locate the body when they land and search the crash site. However, there is a trail on the grass, indicating that George survived and is also heading toward the city. When the FBI shows up to take all of Energyne's research and records, Claire is furious to learn Kate survived the plane crash. Claire claims to the agents that Kate was responsible for the devastation the creatures produced in an effort to clear her own identity. Returning to Davis, he attempts to leave Kate behind since he is sick of always witnessing the worst aspects of people, which he has already witnessed a great deal of during the war. He found George when he was just a young child cowering beneath the car, watching as they butchered his mother. Davis, however, chooses to give Kate another opportunity after hearing her justification for developing CRISPR. She intended to find a treatment for her brother's fatal sickness, but when the corporation planned to weaponize the mutagen, she attempted to destroy it and was imprisoned as a result. Her brother passed away while she was incarcerated. Russell contacts his guys to be rescued since he now likes the pair because they saved his life. Colonel Blake then takes the party to an air base where he shows them video of George and Ralph escaping to the city. Kate claims they are being beckoned by something, indicating that Claire must be waiting with an antidote, while Davis points out that it is impossible for a gorilla and a wolf to travel in a straight line to the same spot. Russell supports their suggestions, but Blake orders them out since he doesn't want any bystanders being hurt. When his attempts to reason with the soldiers outside to let them leave fail, Davis starts a fight and quickly knocks both guards out. When Russell spots them attempting to steal a helicopter, he gives them the keys and a phone so they can stay in touch. Blake's crew tries to halt the animals in the meanwhile, but all of their weapons, even the large explosions, are futile, and the army is destroyed. Russell informs Davis, who doubts they can get everyone out in time, that Blake has decided to evacuate the city before the creatures arrive. When George and Ralph get to the city, the destruction starts right away. They knock down buildings, wreck cars, and even shoot any approaching helicopter. The military confronts the animals with a massive army of tanks and weapons, but nothing stops them from destroying everything in their path. Lizzie soon follows down the river, joining the other creatures to inflict even more destruction by biting the tanks and jets that stand in its path with its large mouth. Blake, who is in need of a solution, instructs his troops to prepare a bomb that would destroy half of the city. Russell attempts to convince Blake to alter his mind by saying that Davis and Kate are on their way to get the antidote. But Blake doesn't believe him because they took his chopper, so he sends Russell outside. When Russell learns the outcome of the evidence discovered in the company, he immediately calls for a ride so he can make some arrests. Davis and Kate reach Energyne and collect 3 antidote vials as the bomb-carrying plane takes flight. The cure will halt the aggressiveness but retain the animal's size, Claire explains as she approaches to stop them after spotting them on the security cams. After that, she grabs the vials from Kate and shoots Davis, who collapses unconscious to the ground. After that, Claire kidnaps Kate and takes her to the roof with her. However, George scales the building and destroys the helicopter's tail before they can leave. Kate is also on the verge of passing away as a result, but Davis returns and holds her as he explains that no essential organs were struck by the gunshot. Kate says she was able to retain one of the vials, so they can still save George at least, while George goes on to smash the antenna delivering the signal. The second time Claire tries to approach the group, Kate takes advantage of the opportunity to stow the antidote in her bag before hitting Claire as Davis calls for his buddy. In order to obtain the antidote as well, George advances and seizes Kate. The final computer and a lab rat are being taken with Brett as he tries to go through the stairs so he may resume his business later. He runs into Russell on the main level, and in exchange for letting him leave as opposed to arresting him, the agent takes the stuff from him. However, as soon as Brett exits the building, he is suddenly struck by falling debris. While George begins to calm down as a result of the antidote outside, Lizzie and Ralph help to destroy the building. The broken helicopter is taken by Davis and Kate just before the building collapses, saving their lives but also forcing the chopper to fall to the ground. Davis then observes that many people are still present and that George is now feeling better. Davis instructs Kate to seek out Russell as he armed himself and joins the fight with George while Lizzie and Ralph are fighting. Lizzie ultimately kills Ralph by biting him on the throat as the creatures tumble around and trade savage blows. Now when George and Lizzie are engaged in combat, it appears like George is finding it difficult to gain the upper hand, so Davis launches a belt of grenades towards Lizzie's back. Sadly, Lizzie has become extremely strong, and the grenades barely make a dent. After swiftly recovering, Lizzie tosses George into a wall, breaking a steel rod through the gorilla's chest. Then Lizzie attempts to approach him to finish him off, but Davis steps in and uses all of the helicopter's weaponry to divert the crocodile. Lizzie succumbs to it and starts pursuing Davis, nearly murdering him. To put an end to the battle, George takes the steel bar and leaps into the air before stabbing Lizzie in the eyes. Russell receives Kate's message regarding the antidote and phones Blake to relay the information. Blake chooses to cancel the airstrike operation after seeing the dead on the displays and seeing George is doing well. Unfortunately, after winning, George passes out, and Davis must take some time to mourn his best friend. However, just as Davis is about to leave, he notices some twitching and realizes George is playing a practical joke on him. Before Davis and the gorilla exchange fist bump, the gorilla extends his middle finger. Finding a location to put George is now Davis's next task.